Hello, friends. Welcome to the Wake Up with Gratitude podcast. I am very excited to have my friend Alysha Myronuk this morning. Hello, friend.
Hi, Julie. Thank you so much for having me today.
Oh, I'm really looking forward to this conversation because Alysha is a really incredible entrepreneur and has created this really cool term called Myrony, which is my irony. And she's going to explain all this to us. But not only did she come up with this really great and interesting term, she's the host of the That's Myrony podcast. She also has a spiritual coaching business, which is My Myrony Mentoring. And she has what she calls a spiritual spidey-sense. What I love about Alicia is that she's always looking for the interesting ways that people connect, the way that our lives take really different twists and turns that were often unexpected. And I know a lot of that kind of comes from your own story. I know it hasn't really always been that easy for you, my friend. So I see your beautiful sunny smile and disposition here on our Zoom together, but if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit of your story and how you kind of ended up here, because it wasn't an easy journey.
No, it definitely was not an easy journey, Julie. It's a very crazy story, and there are a lot of twists and turns to it. And for anybody that's interested in hearing more of the story and the first episode of my podcast, it's called Discover Myrony in Your Inner Superpower. And that's what I want to show everybody is that this really is kind of a superpower of so Myrony are the crazy coincidences that happen in life that we can't explain. It's also a more modern day word for synchronicity. However, it has its own definition because it is synchronicity in motion. We may see a sign, but then there's an action we can take when we trust that inner knowing. So, what I try to do is encourage people to pay attention to those signs when we get those gut feelings and those, intuitive pulls and be like, wait, maybe there's something more that I can be doing. And so my story started almost 17 years ago when my father was terminally ill and I was engaged and married in 6 days. He passed away 1 week to the time that I got married. But what's even crazier is I was born, engaged, and married in the same hospital. How does that happen? Thanks to a lot of irony. So
Oh,
so it was at that time that I saw all these signs. Like, for example, 6 days to plan a wedding, and it ended up being a 50-person wedding. It wasn't like a super, super small wedding. And it's like, well, what am I gonna wear? First wedding dress I tried on was the dress of my dreams. The shoes were the last pair of my size. Definitely felt like Cinderella that day. Everything was just falling into place. But then the day before, the reception was going to be in the courtyard of this hospital, again, where I was born at, where it, it was torrential downpour the day before. Like, I mean, sheets of rain. I grew up in New Jersey outside of New York City. So, for anybody that knows, after rain like that, it should be hot and humid. But everybody's like, what are you going to do? I mean, it was just absolutely pouring. And I said, if there truly is a God, he will not take this away from my father. And the next day, I witnessed one of the most beautiful days I'd ever seen. It was not a drop of rain, not a cloud in the sky, no humidity, which is unheard of at the end of summer because this was August 22nd, and then it was in the mid 70s. It was just an absolutely unheard of day. I believe I was shown that sign because my life was going to get even crazier moving forward. So, and again, anybody wants to hear those deeper stories, happy to, that you can hear in this episode. But then what ended up happening is that my life literally fell apart like a year later. I ended up buying this restaurant with my then husband, and things really some crazy twists and turns happened where we were on our way to divorce in a year's time. There was actually a girl who I don't know how this happened, but for some reason she actually told me she had cancer and was going through chemotherapy and she had a hernia. I don't know how she came up with this. She decided she wanted my husband, left hers, and this started at her son's 1 year birthday party. And I also owned a restaurant at this time. And I was broken. Now, I know it takes two to tango. And, and the crazy thing is I really can't say anything, bad about my ex, or even, like in the sense of, there were just a lot of things that happened in this very short period of time. It was almost like the perfect storm. But I believe I went through all those things so that I eventually could understand, what other people go through. And I kept, my one saving grace was I well, I was able to tap into my father's energy after he passed. And so I was being given kind of guidance from that higher perspective, which is what absolutely saved me. And then the biggest thing, and this was one of the biggest ironies, actually, this other woman, she became pregnant. That's when I tried to kill myself. I was saved from that. Thank God, I woke up. I drank a lot of wine. I took a sleeping pill and I took a bath. I didn't take multiple sleeping pills. I was trying to give myself like a 50-50 chance, to, like I said, I don't want to die. I just don't know how to live anymore. And I wake up in this cold bath and I'm like, okay, you can't do this. You can't add more trauma to my family with everything that has happened. And and then my greatest gift was, the irony is my friend who took my wedding pictures gave me this book the day before she moved away, called Many Lives, Many Masters by Dr. Brian Weiss. And that book saved my life. And so I look at that was the greatest gift that I was given. And so that is what I'm trying to do for others, is to show, even when we are in the darkest points in our life, there really is beauty at the end if you just keep following. It's like you're in a dark tunnel, but there's light at the end, and you just got to keep walking towards that light. And that is where the gratitude then comes into play.
Wow, my friend. I feel like we need to take a breath and a pause just to like, for those that have never met you or heard any parts of your story, there's a lot that happened in a very short period of time. And the way that you can look at that part of your journey with that gratitude and that understanding of, why maybe you went through it. I mean, we don't always know, as Jim Rohn would say. I wouldn't sign up for that class. But something you said there about, having gone through so many really big challenges, like those are all huge life challenges that you packed into a very short amount of time. And it's that willingness to say, well, I've been through this, so it helps me to be better to help others and to support other people. And I think that is in itself a really rich gift, for sure. So I just want to like touch on a couple little things there. So, um, your father did get to see you married?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
he was, yeah, he was there, and he was, it was beautiful.
Yeah.
So, and then it was crazy because he passed away 1 week to the time that we got
Okay.
married. And so it was, my mom actually asked, why can't we do this in 2 weeks? And I said, we don't have 2 weeks. I
Yeah.
just knew.
Do you think that that's interesting though? I mean, I'm sure you're not the only person, I'm sure, who got married so that their parents would be alive or a parent would be alive. Do you think sometimes, like, when we do things that are not just fully for ourselves, that might get us into a little bit of trouble when you think about gut feeling and intuition and stuff? Or for you at the time, was it like, this is exactly what needs to happen? I'm curious about that.
Oh, it was beyond. I mean, my my ex and I, like, we talked about marriage. Like, we knew we were going to get married. Like, I did not get married just for my dad. I just and it was funny because it was my dad's younger sister. My aunt was like, why don't you get married? Because I was crying to her about, my dad not being there. I was a his only daughter, total daddy's girl. So I did do it for him in a sense, but I took marriage, it was not a light decision by any means.
Yeah.
And so, it's like I didn't just get married for him, but truthfully, I mean, the story I find, so in my logo, I have this little winky face in the O, and I say that I represent God as love with an awesome sense of humor. My last name is literally Myronic, pronounced Myronic, spelled differently, but it's kind of funny. Everybody has these Myronic experiences, just not the way I spell my last name. So I actually say that, my higher self chose this whole path because eventually I had to go back to being Myronic so that I could bring Myrony to the world. So if that was one of the reasons, then I'm happy to have gone through it.
It's so interesting. And I'm much like you. I don't look back on anything with regret at all. I was just kind of curious because I think about, so a lot of people that listen to the podcast probably don't know this about me, but this is my second marriage. I am divorced from my first husband. And we got caught in the trap of, we wanted to get married, but I'm not entirely sure we wanted to get married to each other. And then we got into it, and my gut actually knew that this wasn't the right person for me, but I was like, we're already
Ah,
so far into it, like, because we planned it a year ahead of time. It was my dream wedding. Like, I planned the wedding. So interesting. I can look back now and say, well, I had my dream wedding. I just didn't have the right partner for it. So
oh,
that's just
that's
why I asked that
interesting.
question, right? It's like sometimes we do things, and at the time there, like for me, there was something in my gut, but I wasn't at the point. I mean, it was 20 years ago now, and I hadn't learned how to listen to my gut yet. So I just sort of went through with it anyway. And when I fast forward and I think about how my husband and I, like Dan, the man that I've been married to for almost 12 years, I think about how, we ended up getting married really quickly because there was like a timing thing. It was actually a timing thing, but in a happy way. My parents were going to be in town, my sister was going to be in town, and my best friend were going to be in town, and they all lived like
Oh,
in all different places in Canada. So we were like, this is, we have to put together our wedding that weekend because it's the only way. Like they're already all going to be here, and they're like the most important people. So we ended up putting our whole wedding together in 4 months, which is, I mean, it's a little bit more time than you, but it still seems really fast. And in a
yeah.
way, because I'd already had my dream wedding, I could just have the right wedding for us,
Oh,
and we had 40 people and it was perfect. So that's kind of where I was going with that, is like, I think, and you have this spiritual spidey sense that you talk about. And I think it's one of those things that over time we develop and we learn and we trust, and hopefully we trust. And I think that's one of the things that you help people with, right? Is you help them to learn how to trust. So
I
tell me a little
do.
bit about that spiritual spidey sense.
Well, I want to go back really quickly because, with the wedding, like I did not question it at all. I do believe he was one of my good soulmates, and I believe we have more than, one soulmate out there. And there's a really powerful book also by Dr. Brian Weiss called Only Love is Real, for anybody that wants to hear more on the soulmate side. But the thing is that I did go against my intuition the day of this party, of this where I felt like every single sign from above was telling me not to go to this party. And this is where this all happened.
Oh.
And I mean, down to our navigation would not take us there. My ex did not want to go. The navigation wouldn't take us there. And then she even made a comment when we finally got there that I should have been like, my intuition told me she was up to something. So that is where I went against it. And that is where I feel like my life somehow, I all of a sudden was like in this parallel universe and what my life was supposed to be, because I did not listen to that intuition.
And sometimes when we have an intuition to, like, if we've made a commitment
Mhm.
and our intuition tells us otherwise, like you shouldn't be going, it's like it's tricky to learn, because I do think this is a learn thing, to learn when is it
It,
you're just complaining because you don't want to go and it's worth going, because sometimes it does turn out really well, or your intuition's like really giving you these signals. And as you said, like your GPS wasn't taking you there. And yeah, sometimes it's learning to, how do I like tap in and listen, like, Alicia, how do I do that? Like, how do I tap in and know that it's my GPS isn't sending me the wrong place because I shouldn't be there. My GPS is sending me the wrong place because I need to be there and I've got to keep going. Or my GPS is saying, don't go there. Like, this is not the right place for you to go. So how do I tap into that? How do I learn and develop that intuition?
well, I think the thing is that you really want to just sit with your heart and your soul for like a few minutes. It's like when I always tell my clients, when it's the hamster wheel of your brain is going, what if, what if, what if, what if? And if you just sit for a second and even look at it from this higher self perspective, when we can really start looking at it from this much greater perspective, we start seeing things much clearer. And so I just always recommend sit with your heart and your soul and see what is really telling you, because how many times have we said, oh, I went against my gut intuition and I was really sorry about that.
And when do we say I followed my gut and it didn't work out? I don't think I've ever said, "Oh yeah, I followed my gut on this one, but it totally didn't work out."
Well, and sometimes, truthfully, sometimes those mistakes are meant to happen because it's going to even open up another door that we wouldn't have opened otherwise. So if we look at, I really believe if we look at those, if we want to call them quote unquote mistakes and, looking at them as a lesson more than anything. And so I did learn after that experience to always trust my intuition, to always trust the guidance I would receive that I believe receiving from above. And, not going against it. Believe me, there's many times where I'm just like, what the heck am I doing? But for some reason, it leads. So what I like to say, Myronies are they're like spiritual breadcrumbs. Sometimes you get like a nice big loaf of bread. But sometimes you get the smallest crumb, but the pull is so strong and you're like, why? Why am I doing this? Why do I feel so compelled to do this? And then that's how it leads, to your next to then, it's like following like Hansel and Gretel in some weird ways.
Well, it's kind of like you said, the book you received, right?
Yeah.
That book you received by Brian Weiss, Many Lives, Many Masters. It's a great book. I was also gifted the book from a friend, and then I ended up seeing him speak live
Mm.
way back when Hay House were doing their I Can Do It events. And interestingly, that breadcrumb like sat for a really long time for me. And then I just started exploring it kind of in the past year or so. So, but it was there. It was definitely planted a long time ago. So that was something for you. That was that breadcrumb, that seed. And where did that kind of lead you, that exploration into? Because this is not really, it's not mainstream. That's for sure.
No,
Definitely
no.
not. So what kind of led you to go in that direction and discover more about this?
Well, when I read that book, I was so blown away by the concept of, I loved how it was so all encompassing of, but looking at it that our higher selves choose everything that happens in life. And so my goal was to figure out why did my higher self choose this crazy life? Because at that point, I'd dealt with fibromyalgia since I was 18 years old, very, very severe pain, dealt with, definitely alcohol abuse and, prescription drug abuse at times. And, just really, losing my dad at a young age, before I turned 30, I had gone through most of what people consider these life experiences, marriage, divorce, loss of a parent, dealing with chronic pain, dealing with financial, it was just everything. But see, then when that book, I like connected to it so much, but then every time I would read, I would just or after I read it, every time I would try to look from this higher self perspective. But then I was given the greatest gift of my irony was when I had closed my restaurant. I had to close it was closed on April 22nd of 2008. And I was, now I'm bankrupt and, it was due to the economy and just absolutely broken again, yet again. And I felt like kind of a caged animal, so I wasn't leaving my apartment. Well, I turned Oprah on the TV. I happened to be in my bedroom, didn't have a TV in my bedroom at the time. And I hear these words, and I was like, that sounds like the author of Many Lives, Many Masters. Sure enough, here's Dr. Brian Weiss talking to Oprah. It was the 20th anniversary of his book.
Oh,
That was the next biggest sign. Keep going, keep figuring out why. Why did this happen? There's something greater, there's something so much more. And so what brings into that is I didn't even know about this word of Myrony at the time, but I would see these numbers over and over and over, and I'm like, why do I keep seeing them? Or a song would be playing, and there's actually a song in my daughter's eyes that my dad wanted to dedicate at my wedding,
mm,
and he was in too much pain when my at the wedding, so he never got to hear the song. And I literally was, the day he passed away, which we didn't know he was going to pass away that day. Um, I remember being in a car, like on the way to the hospital, and I get out of the car to grab the CD. Like something was said, grab that CD. And I played it for him with everyone around, and right before he passed away. And then there was, my mom was helping, financially with this restaurant when things were going down, and already everything had fallen apart with my ex, and it was just like, just keep going, just keep going. That song played on the radio as she was driving to the bank to try to help. Now it all fell apart, but I can't deny the, you know, the level of coincidence, and that's why I say there are no coincidences. Maybe it's just meant to be showing this greater path that we don't even understand what it is, and you won't be able to figure out till, in some cases, years later.
That's really important too, to understand that sometimes we don't like when we're in it, because sometimes we are. Sometimes we're in the middle of the story and we don't know where it's going.
Mhm.
And a lot of us in the past year have been through very difficult stories, and some are out of the story and some are still in the middle. I am getting to the end of some of the challenges we went through in 2020. We're close to wrapping up the that part of my story. Um, but when you're in it, you're like, I don't know. I'm like, well, I know there's a lesson here somewhere. Right now, though, it doesn't feel very good. But I think also as we grow and evolve as spiritual beings, we do start to understand that, like, first of all, we get to where we are because of choices that we've made, right? Whether we
Mhm.
followed intuition or not, it was our choices that brought us to where we are. And if a lesson keeps showing up in our lives, right? Kind of what you were seeing, a lot of this similar lessons showing up. It's like because we didn't learn what we were meant to learn from that time. And like you said, it can be years later where we actually say, oh, you know what? Now I totally get, like, that made sense. And it's not that we are grateful for the tragedies and challenges that we went through. I'm not grateful, that I spent a week in the hospital in a coma. I'm not grateful that, we've lost like loved ones. Of course not. That's not about that. It's about what we look at, what came out of that, and how we found different ways to live, and maybe a different reverence for life, especially after loss, I think is a really great gift. So you talked about gratitude in your life. Alicia, how does that show up for you today? How are you practicing gratitude?
I mean, I practice gratitude in everything that I do. I mean, I really do. I practice gratitude really in helping others, because that's my biggest thing. I truly believe I went through what I went through so that I could help others that felt lost like I did. And like it was being able to tap to this higher awareness, and being given guidance, where my mom, like, she passed away in 2011, and I'll never forget. And my mom and dad had a beautiful soulmate relationship, and I'll never forget when she was about to pass away, and where she had just turned 70 on December 1st, and 6 days later she passed away. And I remember her pointing in the corner. I was like, dad's here to take you now, isn't he? And so if we can get to that point of looking at everything, there, even though, yes, traumatic and horrible tragedies happen, but there's somehow when we can still look from that higher place and know that maybe we don't have all the answers to everything, and if we just keep searching from that perspective, we can see the beauty through the ugly. And so, that's what I try to do with my Myrony mentoring. Is I say, as a mentor, when people say, well, what are your credentials? I say life. you know,
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. Yeah, I think
what
if we
better?
listen to if we listen to that first episode of your podcast, which I've listened to, you can understand like where you're coming from and how you've here's the thing. Someone else could have been through similar experiences and not decided to change their perspective and grow and learn and ended up in a very different place, right? But you
Mhm.
decided, you took you took a little, like you said, those breadcrumbs here and there, and that's led you to becoming someone who now is really there to be able to serve others, because you're like, I can empathize with what you might be going through right now, because there's a lot of stuff at a very young age that you've been through. So I love that so much, the way that you support people. That's totally awesome. So Alicia, what's the best place to connect with you? Like, where do you like to hang out?
Where do I like to hang out? Well, I mean, people can connect with me anywhere. My website is that'smyrony.com, where you can find out about the podcast and also my Myrony Mentoring. I call them intuitive soul sessions. And if anybody enjoys the spiritual side, I gave a interview on another podcast called Sense of Soul, where I go into a much deeper spiritual side to this, where I did have a spiritual experience back in 2015 that also altered my life, and that's actually part of the work that I do through these intuitive soul sessions. And so, yes, I call it my spiritual spidey sense. And I want to have other people tap into their superpowers, which is just gaining this greater awareness to these signs that are given to us, and in so many ways that we don't even realize that that may be a way that we're being communicated with. So but social media, it's pretty easy. I'm the only Alysha Myronuk out there. You can't, so you can connect with me there. I have, Facebook group for That's Myrony, and Instagram, and but please reach out wherever. But on That's Myrony, under My Myrony Mentoring, I do uh, a free intuitive soul session, a short one for 30 minutes, but for one of your listeners, if they hear this and they mention your podcast, Julie, I'd love to gift them an hour.
Wow, that's extremely generous of you. I was already thinking 30 minutes was very generous. So thank you. That's amazing. That's a really amazing gift, friends. So if you are, you're listening, and I would definitely accept that gift. That is extremely generous of you. Thank you so much. I feel like there might be another podcast in our future to dig deeper into that. I know there's a lot of beautiful facets of your life. Like I said, when in the interview beginning, is like your life has just had so many twists and turns. And to see you today, just smiling, happy, radiant, just to have this great attitude, that to me, that's just really inspiring, because there are so many reasons why you could just say, life sucks, everybody's against me, this is not, I'm not meant for greater things. And yet you went the other direction, and you took those gifts and you turned it into something else and a way to serve others. Oh, it's just amazing, Alicia. I'm so grateful for this time together. Thank you so much for sharing your story and being authentic with our community. And I'm glad we finally had the chance to connect in this way.
Oh, thank you so much, Julie. If I can just say one last thing about what I try to do is I try to hold my clients' hands until they're ready to be able to look in that spiritual mirror and say, I chose all of this too. And being able to do that. And when we are able to do that, we gain all the power back in our lives. And then the possibilities really open up for ourselves, because that is what we are meant to be looking at it from, that place of gratitude, love, compassion, and understanding. So thank you so much, Julie, for having me, and I'm so grateful to have been here today.
It's been truly my pleasure. Thanks so much, Alicia.